Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on WSGW. Now, here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. I am your host, Kareem Bowen, here with you for another time of great conversation. I'm not sure what's so funny, but I'm looking at...
You got to slow down when you go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another. You did it last week, too.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray.
There it is.
Radio voice right there. Okay, there we go. Well, as you see, I'm not in the studio by myself, but I'm in the studio today with my producer, John B. in the place to be. John, what's good?
Hello, hello.
Hello. Well, we've got an interesting show for you today. We are going to talk about Wilmington, North Carolina, all of the amazing things. As I was looking at the news and all of the things that were going on and everything that was happening, and we're here, and our hearts and thoughts and prayers, actually, that was supposed to be the opener, are with everyone in southeastern U.S. We talked about them on last week. But the severity of the storm is really beginning to sink in, and looking at, man, the devastation. I have never seen anything like this. This looks almost post-apocalyptic. When I look at the devastation that's taken place just by water alone, this was not a hurricane wind kind of thing. This was all just the power of water and how you cannot stop water when it wants to move. And it is absolutely amazing. So our hearts, our thoughts, our prayers are towards those folks in Georgia and Western North Carolina in terms of what they're dealing with. Have you been paying attention to any of this, John?
I haven't been paying attention to like the main coverage of it, but I've seen like posts and things popping up, especially about kind of the efforts of just residents nearby in terms of distributing. I think it's crazy. You see like dirt bikes and ATVs going out and distributing supplies in these like isolated areas.
But in this world of great divisiveness, and I know both of us are over politics, but in this season where we are right now, where there's such a divide among Americans, these types of moments, I think, is when we are at our best. It's when we come together, we put politics aside, hopefully for the most part, and we take care of our fellow man, and we stand up for one another. We fight for others to have what they need. And I think that that's what makes America beautiful. When I think about America, some of the greatest times have also been some of the lowest times in the country. When we think about it, the first thing that comes to mind, probably for the two of us, is probably 9/11, when our nation was hit by terrorists, and we saw the best of America come forward. We saw us stand in solidarity. We saw us look out for the fellow man. And for a short period of time, we actually showed that we cared and loved each other. We looked as one nation under God. And so it was an amazing time. And those are the times that I really appreciate. And seeing what's happening in the southeastern part of our country right now, with hundreds of people confirmed dead, hundreds of people still missing. I was looking at one particular city, because I go through and I have all of the channels, so I'm looking at all of the little like outer skirts of, not the main cities, but the outskirt cities, and I'm looking at what they're reporting, and some areas 500, 600 people that are missing and unaccounted for is absolutely...
Well, it's because they can't get to them.
Well, I'm hoping that's all that it is.
Yeah.
But when you look at the landslides and you look how, these cities and these towns have just been completely decimated and wiped off the face of the earth. Then the reportings of the one plant that did not let their workers leave or gave them a very late leave, and how people were coming out of the plant being swept away in the floodwaters is just absolutely mind-boggling. So once again, we are praying for you all. We're going to be hurrying up and waiting. The road to recovery is going to be very slow and methodical. And so, man, so much going on. And these are the times when I wish I could be a FEMA worker sometime and just go down there and I don't know what, pass a bottle of water, jug of water, or do something. But there's so many Americans out there who I consider American heroes who are out there doing the work, setting up food trucks and things of that nature. So continue to pray for them down there in the southeastern part of the country. Could keep the faith, hope alive. There have been all kinds of conflicting reports. Now, one of the things that I did hear, which is problematic, is when our president said that we can't stand a few more of these storms taking place. Just financially, we're just strapped. We got 9 wars going on. We're funding a whole nother country with what they got going on. There's a lot happening in the world.
We haven't been able to pay for anything for.
We'll just borrow more money from China, I guess, right? But so our hearts, the idea was that our hearts and our thoughts and our prayers are with those in Atlanta, Georgia, Florida, and North Carolina, and the other affected areas. Now, I do want to turn to something that I've been talking about and hadn't said anything for a while because there was nothing to say. But as you know, you may not know, Tyree Nichols, the young man that was pulled out of his car and beaten by officers, there was finally a verdict on the state of those officers. Now, there were initially 5 officers that were a part of this case. 2 of those officers turned state's evidence and began to prosecute, which means this is interesting because they said that they were guilty. They beat him to death. And I watched the video, and you see the officers pulling him out the car. And there were all of these stories about some girlfriend that they, it was over a woman or something, whatever. But you hear in the videos, that was released, police officers said, "Hey, turn off your video camera. We got to get our stories together." And they're trying to get and sync their stories
after the fact.
Yeah. This is horrific. This is the stuff that makes your skin crawl and your stomach turn. But they were found guilty. Well, 3 of them did not have the larger charge of violating his civil rights, which led to his murder, but to lesser charges. But this is the crazy thing. So 3 of them took it to trial, and they were off on the highest charge. But the 2 that pled guilty to the highest charge. And now, so they all have to deal with sentencing. I guess this is, you take your gamble in the court. Sometimes it plays off and sometimes it doesn't. But the 29-year-old now, his family is thankful for some type of response. And it's going to be interesting to see what takes place, because there are now still these are federal charges. There are still now state charges that they have to deal with to find out what takes place there. But what we're going to see pretty quickly is those civil charges coming out. I saw my guy, Ben Crump, whom I've had the opportunity of speaking with on several occasions, just sharing like, hey, now we get to this. We'll have the civil cases. Our families are getting some type of response from the criminal justice system, and we can move on. Also, in like fashion, there have been new charges brought up on the police officers involved with the Breonna Taylor case.
Really?
New charges. Yeah.
I hadn't heard of that.
So we'll be talking about those pretty soon, because though they're going to be brought up on federal charges once again regarding that. And we'll talk about that as that comes. And that's something where they were completely exonerated from all charges. New charges have been filed and are forthcoming. All right. So the U.S. economy, if we're going to talk about it, I think that this is the closest that I really want to get to talking about politics at all, if that's what it is. But we will talk about politics. We don't want to, but we got to. It is that season. But the U.S. economy, according to paper, on paper, it is steamrolling. Chugga, 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 chugga. No more I think I can. It's chugging along. The stock market and the Dow Jones are doing record highs that they're doing there. We've seemingly staved off a recession, which has been a concern for all Americans across the board. We see first cuts of interest rate by 0.5%. Strong job numbers just coming out today. GDP, 10%. All of these great things when you look at it on paper. But how are people feeling? That's Wall Street. How are people feeling on Main Street?
Kareem, today I received a piece of Halloween candy from a friend. It was one of those Whoppers, the malt ball things.
Yes.
And it was the mini one. So usually it's a little wrapper with 3 of them in it. This only had 2 in it. Shrinkflation is real. They've reduced the number of, I don't know if this was just a fluke, but I think it was shrinkflation. I think this is a sign that the economy is downhill. Halloween candy is shrinking. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, you know it's bad when the kids, you go in and the Kit Kat, they get 4 bars. I actually went to the store and now they have like 2 bars. They got 2-bar Kit Kats. I'm like, what is this? So you call this shrinkflation?
Shrinkflation.
Yeah. So Wall Street is booming, and I often say this. We look at the numbers, and for years the stock market is breaking records. And I'm like going, how come we don't see this anywhere else? So if you go to the grocery store, those things have not changed. As you all understand and well know, it takes some time for those major milestones to get down. And sometimes it seems like they never really get to where we are when we look at the price of gas and the things that we're paying for. Heck, we're in a situation right now where, because of other wars that are going on and us being in everyone's business, over in the Middle East, we are now possibly in a situation where we could be in a full-scale war and see those prices of gasoline increase. So it'll be interesting to see what takes place. This is all a part of being an American. This is the cost of doing business in the grand old US of A. So on to the things that we all love to talk about and no one is tired of, because we just can't wait to get more of this information. Election 2024. I'm sharing this on today because the candidates are coming to the wonderful Great Lakes state of Michigan. And on yesterday, I happened to be out on campus at Saginaw Valley State University, home of the Cardinals. And I was like, why are there so many people on campus? Like, what's going on? I'm trying to get to campus. There's police officers blocking both sides of the roads in and out. Well, someone forgot to notify me, or I didn't listen.
I didn't know either.
You didn't know either?
No.
So I get to campus and I'm talking to students. I'm like, where are all the students at? And so number 45, Donald Trump, was on campus at Saginaw Valley State University. Did not know it, but soon the students say, oh, you got to watch it. So we're watching it. And I'm dying laughing because I see so many of the students. They're probably about 50 or so inner city black men that were like, hey, we want to go to the rally. And guess where they got positioned? Right behind Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Talk about good placement. I'm going to tell you right now, the next time I go to a Trump rally, I want preferred seating as well. And I think as a black man, with this new line that were the blacks for black men for Trump, I might get preferential treatment as well there. But yeah, so I'm watching them and they're texting in real time to be like, hey, can you see me can you see me? I'm on TV. And it was the most funny thing. But I was sitting there and I listened for quite a while. And I was just, one thing that I'm going to tell you, and I say this all the time, I think number 45 is wacko. But one thing that he is also is good for TV. He is hilarious. He's quick on his feet. He said something to the tune of, oh, have you seen Joe Biden? He's declined. He's almost dumb now. Well, Kamala, she was born that way. And I sit there and I'm like, I'm appalled and laughing at the same time. But it's just, I was blown away. But it was a great opportunity. The students were able to partake in the event that on yesterday. Absolutely jam-packed at was it the Writer Center or whatever it's called? Jam-packed in there. So that is what's happening. So he's in town here. Kamala Harris is in Flint, Michigan. She'll be meeting with some of the leaders of the Arab community. I couldn't understand why she would come to Flint to do that and not Dearborn. But hey, it is what it is. But we will be seeing probably these candidates several more times, as Michigan is one of those do or die states that they must win. Everyone must have. Now, I do have a question, Jonathan, and this question is, have you heard the statements or the excerpts from Melania Trump's book that she's releasing.
I heard commentary about it. I
Have
haven't
you heard
the word
the
specifically.
commentary or any of the excerpts from the Melania Trump booklet that they are now offering to come out?
What is this? What is that?
Help me help myself. Well, anyway, so now her husband is the one that kind of sent Roe v. Wade packing, and she's now. I was listening. She was very emphatic that a woman should have the right to determine if she's going to have an abortion or not. And I was like, this woman doesn't like that man. We there was a whole spectacle a couple of years ago when I think they were coming off of Air Force One or something a number of years ago. And he tried to reach for her hand and she pushed his hand away. Did you ever see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm wondering if she's just like, Donald, I am so over this. You are such a pig. I can't take it anymore. I'm going to make my own money and tell my own story, Donald. How did I do?
I've never heard Melania Trump speak. So as far as I'm concerned, you nailed it.
But she came out with that position, which is so different than I know. I am the Eddie Murphy of 2024, right? My impersonations are amazing. Thank you, those of you who are listening via social media out there. Like, this kid is crazy. But yes, I thought it was interesting that she would take such a strong position, and why put this out a month before people go to ballot? I don't think she wants him to win.
There's a couple things that I think about this. One, that's pretty convenient for Trump's standpoint to have his wife come out and say, no, I support. So people who aren't convinced on the Democrat side might be able to, okay, well, maybe she's got a little bit of pull with
and she
him.
Can leverage. Yeah.
And also Trump has made it clear he just wants it back to the states. And that's what he wanted to accomplish. And through his Supreme Court appointments, the issue was thrown back to the state. And he also has said recently that he would not sign a federal abortion ban.
Yeah, so he would, then he wouldn't, then he would, then he wouldn't. But
he never said he would. He was asked 100 times and he never answered the question.
I'll give you that. This is my issue though with pushing something back to the states where those states are still in the 1950s. A lot of things, if you push them back to the state, could be quite horrific, because the oversight and the reason why federal government were giving certain things were for the purpose of the fact that the states were not necessarily doing such a great job in terms of providing opportunity and equity, especially when it came to folks of color and women as it related. So this issue of Roe v. Wade was one of the reasons why those protections were given in the federal government. Now, as I've said before, I'm fighting a fight that I don't have a dog in, other than the fact for folks who believe and think that they have the right to control their bodies and their decisions. I stand with them on that. But I certainly believe that this world has so many things that we are separated on, and I just wish people would just be allowed to take care of their own business. Now, I don't want to talk about the debate because I thought the debate was retarded. Excuse me. Let me take that back. Can we edit that out?
Yeah. Yes.
I did not like the outcome of the debate, and I apologize for the use of the word retarded. Something that we grew up as kids that we just never got away from. So I certainly don't mean to impugn anybody. If that word offends you, I certainly apologize on today. But it was a bit of a crazy spectacle. I'll say that. I've never seen two people debate. I thought it was going to break out into a love fest. Like, I was just waiting for Love Shack by the B-52s. Is that who sang that song?
I don't know.
The Love Shack.
I know what song you're talking about. This isn't going to help.
Jonathan. We can't get together. Well, anyway,
now you're going to get us copyright struck too, man.
So when this portion of the show is edited out and you just see me moving and dancing and my lips moving, but you don't hear, that's what it is. Copyright infringement. But it was just the most interesting situation, because it was almost like they were like, let's see how much we can agree here. Oh, I agree with you. Very nice words. I don't disagree.
Here's why. Both of these VP candidates are meant to center their presidential
I would agree
candidates,
with that.
and so they can't take an extreme position on either thing.
But doesn't that come off as disingenuous?
No, I think generally speaking, I liked that debate more than I disagree with you, and I like that better because you can say I agree, and if you listen to what they were saying, it was I agree with you on this, but not on this.
No,
I
now
agree.
I like that the ability to civilly disagree. I agree with that.
Yep, and that's part of what we saw there.
But I don't agree with the hugging on issues that we don't agree with because think about it. So that was what we saw on TV, which nobody was really paying attention. And then the next day they're back yelling at each other. And so I think these things are crazy. For one, I cannot wait until this season is over. Jonathan, have you made up your mind? I know you're a part of that 2% of the population that are still undecided.
I'm a fence sitter all the way. You
Do
know
you
me.
believe that? Do you believe that people are still undecided about who they're going to vote for?
No, I think people are undecided about if they're going to vote.
Ooh.
I think it's one of those people think if I'm going to vote, this is who I'm going to vote for. But people aren't decided on if they're going to vote.
For an election that is billed as one of the most consequential elections of
The
a
last
lifetime.
4 elections have been billed
Well, this
as the
one
most
is the most consequential. This one is even more consequential than the last election.
I disagree.
Well, that's what they say. So I'm just telling you. So, but with the billing that it has, do you think that what do you think the options are? And this is just me kind of thinking out loud. What do you think the opportunity is for this year that we might see fewer voters voting than we saw in the last election?
I think it's pretty likely, actually. The abortion issue on the ballot last election cycle brought a lot of people out to vote. And how much that was pushed, and they're trying to revive that issue again, and there's just not as much consequence to it this time around, because as I've said, Donald Trump has accomplished what he wanted to accomplish with it, but that brought a lot of people out to vote. I think generally speaking, the decision is, am I going to vote? And
let me ask you this question, because I'm of the opinion that young people are jaded by these candidates and by this whole election cycle. For some reason, it just seems to me, I've talked with so many young people, they're just like, we're not going to vote.
really,
Yeah. So many young people that are just saying, hey, we're not going to vote.
I thought I was in the minority with that kind
Really?
of just burnt out and like, I don't like this.
What is it about this?
I thought people were fired up about this.
That's because you've been watching CNN.
It may be.
But what are you're ready for this to be over?
Oh yeah.
I think most people are ready for this to be over. I'm tired of yard signs. Now, what's interesting is that I haven't seen any signs in Michigan I say any, I'm exaggerating, but very few Kamala Harris signs. I saw some Biden Harris signs where they just kind of drew a line through. They drew a line through Biden and left the Harris up there.
We're cheap in Michigan. We don't want to buy a new sign. What are you talking about? We'll get a Sharpie. We'll write walls on the bottom there.
Have you seen the price of eggs and milk these days? Hey, we gonna hold on to that $15. I don't know how much is your yard sign. $12, $6?
I don't know. I haven't bought one. I'm cheap.
Wow, this is crazy. Okay, we're gonna get to the main conversation today, and we have a good one for you. We're gonna talk about Wilmington, North Carolina, 1898, an American election. I know we're talking about 2024's election, but we're gonna have a conversation that is really interesting about a coup d'etat that took place the day after the election in the great state of North Carolina. I want you guys to take a quick commercial break. Tag, like, share this conversation with your friends, and come on back with more United Shades of Gray, conversations of race in America.
You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
This is Kareem Bowen. We are back with more United Shades of Gray conversations of race in America, Mr. Offensive himself. So here we are. We're talking about, I think it's a really interesting conversation, Wilmington, North Carolina of 1898. And we're going to talk about an American election. This is such an interesting conversation, considering the fact that we're talking about election, considering the fact that so many things such as Black Wall Street, and things of that nature. Lake Lanier in Atlanta, Georgia is another example of this conversation of where we have seen greatness, take place, and then just the greatness in America and humanity, and then also the other side of that. But in the late 1800s, in Wilmington, North Carolina, it was the state's largest city at the time, and was a thriving city, mostly populated by African Americans. This is post Reconstruction and all these other things that are going on. The unusual degree of Black prosperity that existed at this time was absolutely amazing, with elected officials coming from North Carolina out of the city that were African American, doctors, businessmen, all types of folks. There were cities and businesses and buildings and booming economics for African Americans. And in 1898, that is the year that we're going to take a look at, Blacks were a part of what I call the Party of Lincoln. It was when, which makes sense when are you going to say something to me? I see you over there pushing buttons.
Nope.
Okay. The Party of Lincoln. And it makes sense considering that President Lincoln was the one who signed the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing Blacks to fully engage and be American citizens. And so Black people initially, historically, have been Republican in terms of their political stance. And it was the Democratic Party that was often referred to as racist or, white supremacist in their nature. But in North Carolina, Republicans were successful in doing a number of things and initiatives and bringing equity to the political scene because there was a third party. Wow, I wish there were a third party. What would you want? What third party? What would you want your third party? If there was a third party, what would you want it to encompass?
I've voted third party before.
Okay. Which party?
Constitutionalist Party.
Okay.
And their platform, usually, I don't agree with a lot of their candidates this year, but their platform is very much small federal government, kick things to the states. Let's go back to the Constitution, the founding document of our republic that everything is supposed to be built off of. That's usually where I line up, and that's the third party I would go with, usually.
Well, this year, had you heard about the No Labels Party?
No.
Okay, well, the No Labels Party, they actually reached out to me. I knew some people that were in it, and they reached out to me, and they were really talking, a lot of common sense. Some of the very, things about fiscal responsibility from one side, and then, issues of social justice and welfare, and taking care of our people and making Americans first, which I'm sure you've heard that a million times. Those things are things that appeal to me as an American. I think that we're one of the greatest nations in the world. I do believe that immigration is an important part of what we do. I think that we should slow down the process just a little bit, and so that we can really take care of some of the issues that we have here central to home. I believe that our wars are best fought on our own fronts and battles since we have so many things going on. So the No Labels Party almost got me this year until they picked their top man at the ticket. I was like, I'm jumping off. They could not seem to really focus in on a true presidential candidate. I think that where I felt my vote would have really counted. So there is a third party that really assisted the Republicans in 1898 to really be able to be successful in what they were doing. A populist party that was basically a whole bunch of farmers that were fed up with rise in stock prices and all of those other things. And so they teamed up with the Republican Party, and this populist party also include a number of African Americans that were a part of this party. They partnered together with this populist party to form what was called the Fusion Party. How appropriate, right?
That's not a very 1898 word.
It's very forward thinking.
Yeah.
We are the fusion party. And so this fusion party was an example of whites and blacks coming together to rule and to think about economics and the things that were important to us, and race becoming a secondary factor in how they led and governed and all of those other things. So in 1898, this fusion party won the majority, like every single one of the seats. And so it's the Republican Fusion Party. They won every seat that they ran for, in which would be a completely political landslide. I don't think we've seen anything like that in modern history, but every single seat that they ran for, every office they ran for, they won. And we began to see the Democratic Party flailing. Like, what are we going to do? Could you imagine in this election cycle if the Republicans won every last seat that they were running for? What would our government look like? And you could imagine how the Democratic would be like, oh my gosh, we got to break up this coalition. Well, the same thing is what took place in 1898 after this political butt whipping. The Democrats were saying, okay, so what can we do to really change the landscape? How can we break this party up? And as with another book that I showed you all, The Bacon Revolt, we talked about that a while ago. They appealed to the least common portion of ourselves and said, hey, if we can get those farmers, those white farmers, to separate, and we get rid of them, and we can break up this coalition and their affinity and their partnership or their alliance with black folks, we could really have something that is very powerful here. And so we began to see, because they began to set a number of reforms. This was the issue. Not only did they get their behinds handed to them politically, but there were also a number of reforms that these groups of folks were doing with blacks and white people ruling together. The Democrats were not just defeated, they got their behinds handed. So there are a couple of individuals that I want to share names. And some of you, I know some family members of mine that will hear this that are down in Wilmington, North Carolina, will remember some of these names. But Fornifold Simmons, who became the future U.S. senator from North Carolina, Charles Aycock, which became the future governor, and then Alfred Moore Waddell. Alfred Moore Waddell. That's the name. Where was that? It was on one of the state buildings. There was a big plaque with Alfred Moore Waddell outside of one of the cities. I think it was a government building, not a school. But anyways, they were luring away these populist whites away from this coalition and partnership with the Fusion Party with African Americans. And the plan was to consolidate the white vote. Did you find out where it was?
No.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, and so this is one of the reasons. We'll get to that later. But the idea was to consolidate the white vote. It's interesting how the more things change, the more they stay the same. So the idea was to consolidate the white vote by stoking fear and anger, that otherizing thing. And so Mr. Waddell said this. He said, "This is a white man's country, and white men must control and govern it." And then they began to use media. And this is where I think that what John and I do with this responsible broadcasting and our evenness in our conversation is so vitally important, because no one else on the radio air does this like we do this. And I'm sure that you know, because you listen to us all the time, right? So anyways, I think that one of the interesting things is that they began to use media. And then this particular situation, we're talking about print media. It was the way that people communicated, in particular, political cartoons. And do you remember political cartoons?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you?
Political cartoons are studied in high school. Like I remember going through units about like dissecting political cartoons.
Really?
In history. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I actually kind of lived through political cartoons when they were actually be in the newspaper, when there was such a thing. There's some countries and cities out there. Some of you still have newspapers. Shout out to those who still have newspapers. Everything is online, actually printed papers. But so the satire and the comedic humor of political cartoons was such an important thing, and it was funny. And so we would read those things, and they use these as oftentimes to begin to stem the tide and turn and split and consolidate the white vote. They played up on the fear of the Negro rule identification, even though most of the Fusion Party that existed, most of those leaders were white individuals. But they began to put things out there like this one, and this was huge: protect white womanhood. And this was something that echoed the national sentiments across the nation, the idea of black men wanting white women. And once again, our dear friend, Mr. Waddell, said that if it, no, this is a woman wrote into one of the articles, and she said that if it takes a lynching to protect white women, I say lynch. For those of you who are unaware and you don't know what lynching is, that's when they would basically murder black men for whatever crime that white America felt that they had created. Oftentimes, there's a song that is a really interesting song. So if you're listening to this, the name of the song is Strange Fruit by Nina Simone. And I believe that once later, Billie Holiday also did the same song, but it talks about, I think it starts off singing black body swinging in the poplar tree. And it talked about how those black men that were being lynched were like strange fruit hanging from the tree. But anyways, this became the way that they began to dissociate and break the bonds of this fusion party and blacks and whites working together. Alex Manley, who was the owner of a press, the press or the newspaper that was titled The Daily Record, which was, as I said, a black press, he responded to the lady's comment about protecting black women, protecting white women at all costs. And he said something to the effect that there are some cases all black women or white women that are with black men are not because they have been dragged off into the woods, but many of them have decided and chosen with great admiration and desire to be with those black men. Well, you could imagine that the mission that was set out by the Democratic Party to cause and stoke fear and use anger and those things to separate this fusion party, mission accomplished. And just a few days after, just a few days before the election, white voters were super duper angry. They were angry. Black and Republican voters were thoroughly harassed. Those who were going to the box to vote, they were thoroughly harassed. There was a paramilitary group that came about called the Red Shirts. And this is so crazy that we're talking about the Democratic Party where there's so many black people that are part of the party now. That didn't take place until, decades later with Goldstein, who was a racist that was running in the Republican Party. And they said, hey, if Goldstein becomes our candidate, Goldwater, not Goldstein, Goldwater, if Goldwater becomes our candidate, then it's going to cause a split in the party. And blacks left in mass number and became Democrats from that period of time when Goldwater was running. But before then, we were Republicans historically. So these red shirts were harassing blacks and folks from the Fusion Party and keeping them from the ballot blocks. They blocked blacks from voting. Waddell stirred up a crowd one time, and he said, Negro office holders need to end at once, even if it means choking the current of Cape Fear River with their dead bodies. There's been stories in past of black folks being murdered and thrown one into the Mississippi River. Now we have here the Cape Fear River as a part of that. Democrats won all of the seats that they ran for. Every last seat this year, Democrats won them all. And the seats that were not up for election that they remained in, they continued to operate and to do what they could. But the idea for the Democratic Party was not just to win a landslide, but the idea was to make it white control. They wanted to end black participation in politics in the great state of Wilmington. And so as we look at this, they said, what we did not finish, we've got to control. We've got to get rid of all blacks. And so on November 9th, and this was the day after the election, they came up with something called the White Declaration of Independence. And it's crazy because until I was reading a particular book, I had never heard of this before. So it made me kind of research. And then when we were looking like, hey, what are we going to talk about? This is a great time to talk about this. So they wrote what was called the White Declaration of Independence for Wilmington, North Carolina, and essentially it was a coup d'état. A coup d'état, I like saying that word, coup d'état of 1898, and it basically said that blacks would be banned from ever holding office again in Wilmington. That manufacturing jobs that were held by blacks would be giving up, the majority of those to white workers. And then Alex Manley, this is the man who owned the printing press, the Daily Record. He would be made to leave town, forced to leave town in 24 hours. With after that 24 hours was up, they marched over to the Daily Record, which was the printing press in which he owned and was operating. And he made that response that was offensive to to all of white women and white America, about black men being desirous of white women. Emmett Till, once again, supposedly whistled at a white woman and was killed. So this was a prevalent thought in the community. And they set the Daily Record on fire. And as Manley fled town. This is interesting because I don't know what it was, but there was an obsession with burning down things as it related to hatred. You know, some things you say, hey, why tear down a good business? I'd clean it out, take it over, and run a different business out of it. But they burned it down to the ground. They destroyed the only means that Black Americans were utilizing en masse to organize and keep themselves informed with what was going on in the world. The white mayor and aldermen were forced from office. Those were the only two positions that were not up for election. So as they were yet in office doing what they were doing, they were forced from office by the Democratic Party, and new folks were elected to fill those positions. Now, so when we talk about the new politics and we talk about those individuals that were at the center of what was taking place, we then see Mr. Waddell. What was Mr. Waddell's first name? I can't remember his first name. Alfred Moore. That's the name of that's on that building down there. Alfred Moore Waddell, who's the man who said, hey, let's fill the blood with the river with their dead bodies. He became the new mayor of Wilmington. Whites were so angry that the anger then spilled over into the streets. And then we began to see the mob mentality, which often takes place in these particular situations, spilled over into the streets, and they started killing blacks. And many of them were thrown into the very river, in which they said that number is highly contested. I think reported it's somewhere between 40 and 60 African Americans were thrown into the river once murdered. But those reports, of course, by African Americans tend to be much higher. Many other blacks they hid in the wooded cemeteries that existed in the community, but thousands upon thousands of them left Wilmington, North Carolina, never to return. The Democratic Party then, after all of this takes place, presented magazines with covers and images of victory, with pictures portraying blacks as the protagonists, the instigators of this event, which was, as we all can understand by this, a gross misrepresentation of the facts. Wilmington never gained its black majority population ever again. Jim Crow laws and poll taxes, which were being instituted in other places in the South, were quickly instituted in these particular areas, keeping blacks from voting. The spirit of black opportunity was crushed, and black representation in politics was now completely over. And it would be a total of 90 years. That would be 1992 before North Carolina would ever elect another black congressperson in the person of Eva Clayton in 1992, who won her seat by special election. And the history books, history books say it was an unfortunate situation. This is how it's written in history as we look at some of those books and texts that exist. It praises Charles Aycock and had said that he had a keen mind and clear heart, and he was one of the best friends people of color could ever have. He was one of the leaders of the coup d'etat. The legacy of Wilmington continue and remains on many of those things that we see. The names of individuals are on buildings or on statues, on schools and marquees across the city. But the political oppression, gerrymandering, voter suppression laws, those issues yet remain. And if you're paying attention to politics, historically, these are some of the things that have existed in the past after Jim Crow. And we now see those same battles being fought by individuals today, still fighting for equality. So what does this tell us? It's an interesting point in history. It tells me a number of things. One of the things that it says to me is that when we get out of our way and we really work as a nation and we put race aside, that we can do some amazing things, and we as a people become an amazing nation when we embrace the diversity that we have available and everyone's in the room. The other thing that tells me is that the more things change, the more they change the same. And if we are not students of history, I often say that history is lost on the young who are not students of history. But if we don't pay attention to history, we'll be destined to make the same mistakes. Mr. Rowe, who was my history teacher, Mr. Baldwin, who was my history teacher back at Carleton High School, used to ask us this question every day we would come into class. He would say, "What is history?" And then someone would answer the question, raise their hand and say, "Records of the past." And he would ask the next question, "What is the purpose of history?" And we would raise our hand again and we'd say, to learn from past mistakes. So history are a accurate record of the past. And the purpose of history is that we can learn from our past mistakes. And as we look at this is just another example when we talk about the disproportionality of Black folks in politics. It's not that they were never there. It's that someone comes along every now and then and they stoke our greatest fears. And when you look at Jonathan and I, who have the ability, I really like Jonathan as a way. I mean, I joke with him a lot, but I really, really enjoy him being here. I had a conversation with our dear friend, Mark Bassett, who's going to be coming home in November, just one short month. I think about how we're able to forge these great relationships, these bonds, and then to have someone come in because of their desire, because of a need for power, to stoke the fears and the worst parts of ourselves, and to cause us to break those bonds for the gain of power and profitability has been something that has happened in the past. And so I say that to all of my people that are listening today. Let's rise above the fray. Let's show that we are stronger together, that we are better together. Let's show that they that are against us are not more powerful than those that are for us. Let's come together, put our heads together, put our hearts together, and become stronger. Had you ever heard of this story, Jonathan?
I had not.
You had not.
I learned something today.
Jonathan learned something today, which is really kind of hard because Jonathan is a well-read young man. Jonathan, how old are you again?
26.
26 years old. And I'll say something to you. As me being just on the other side of 26, almost 26 times two, it's interesting because this was something that I had never heard. And I was actually reading another book that mentioned this, and I got stuck down the rabbit hole of finding out answers on this, and found this legacy, this nugget of history that I'd never heard of as a grown adult African-American male myself. So history is so vitally important. As my teacher used to say to me, I will ask of you, what is history? It is records of the past. What is the purpose of history? To learn from past mistakes. I hope you guys have enjoyed our program on today. Take care of yourselves and each other. God bless you all. Grace and peace.